Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Facing the Divide. I'm Tommy Waller, a Christian Zionist, president and founder of HaYovel.
And I am Kimberly Troup. I am the U.S. Director of Christian Friends of Israeli Communities, and I am a Christian Zionist.
And I'm Sondra Oster Baras. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I'm the Director of the Israel Office of Christian Friends of Israeli Communities. And we have a really interesting subject today. I think a subject that too many people take for granted. In the United States, I think also in Canada, but perhaps also in a few other countries, there's an annual holiday called Thanksgiving. And we are now approaching that holiday in the United States. And it's a holiday that I know well from my childhood in the United States. It's a holiday that we do not have in Israel, but we thought it would be a great opportunity to express and explore what is Thanksgiving? What does it mean to Americans as they celebrate it? And how do Jews, express this idea of Thanksgiving? And well, Kim, why don't we start with you? I mean, tell us what Thanksgiving means to you.
Well, I think today with when you think Thanksgiving in America, I think two things come to mind, maybe three: football, turkey, and Black Friday shopping. And like all holidays, it's turned into a very commercialized, very crazy thing. But I think it's important for us to go back, for those that are watching, maybe that aren't from North America and maybe aren't familiar with Thanksgiving. I think it's probably everybody's heard of it, but it goes back to a day that was laid out federally, I guess. I don't know. It was a federal holiday where we stop and give thanks, but it really goes back to the time of the Pilgrims, and it really was, they were starving to death. And the Native Americans came in and basically saved their butts and brought them food. And there was plenty for the first time, after a year of really, really tough times and people dying and starvation and sickness and just horrible times. All of a sudden, there was the first harvest, and they saw that this land that really was kind of their promised land that they'd come to, really that there was potential that it could become a promised land. And so they all sat down and they had a giant feast and they gave thanks. And so that's really the foundation of Thanksgiving. So that's where we have the Pilgrims and the Indians and the turkey and all those things come together. But
I have to interrupt here, Kim, because
sure.
I learned something very recently. First of all, I thought Thanksgiving was a holiday in America going back to the Pilgrims and ever since. And I recently discovered it was only in the middle of the 20th century that it was declared an actual legal holiday. And it had been kept on and off at different places. But I learned something else, that before the Pilgrims arrived in Massachusetts, in Plymouth Bay, which is how I also learned the same story. It was the whole thing with the Pilgrims and in Massachusetts, that in Virginia, it was actually the first Thanksgiving was in Virginia when settlers came to Jamestown. Yep. And also it's a similar story, after a year of hardship and everything, and they had a harvest. And so that was actually the first Thanksgiving. And I spoke once to a friend of mine who's originally from Richmond, and she says, well, of course, Virginia was before Massachusetts. So there you have it.
For sure. But I always liken it to, I believe it is, isn't it Shavuot is the giving of thanks, or the first fruits, harvest. I mean, that's what I've always, which I know is in the spring, because it's a winter harvest.
Well, actually, it's different things. The Shavuot is when and each of the feasts, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, there is an agricultural element. So Passover, we celebrate the beginning of the barley harvest. Shavuot, we celebrate the wheat harvest, the beginning of the wheat harvest. Okay. But it is actually the Feast of Tabernacles, which is in the fall, which falls just a few weeks generally before Thanksgiving, that celebrates the conclusion of all these harvests, including bringing in the fruits from the trees, everything, whether it's the wheat or the barley or the fruit. And Tommy, I know, is very involved now in harvesting the grapes. Well, it is also around the Feast of the Tabernacles that the grape harvest is nearing its conclusion.
Conclusion.
And so that is clearly, it's the Feast of Tabernacles, I think, more than anything, that celebrates the completion of the harvest.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so this goes right into, we want to talk about Thanksgiving in Israel. Is there a Thanksgiving in Israel? How do Jews give thanks? Because I think as Christians, we read our Bible, and I would say at minimum 50 times, either Thanksgiving or giving thanks. And I'm sure other times, those are just the specific words that are in the Bible of giving thanks and Thanksgiving. At least 50 times and much more, as a general idea of we need to thank God for everything around us. So giving thanks is not a foreign concept to Christianity, but with the harvest. So what's interesting to me is we talk about Shavuot, we talk about Passover, and it's the beginning of the harvest, that you give thanks before the harvest has even come in, like it's the beginning. So what are some differences? How do Jews give thanks? What are some ways that, because I know there's so many ways.
Well, that's a big question, the very long answer, but let me divide it up into different pieces. So first of all, we talked about the Feast of Tabernacles. Nobody would ever call that Thanksgiving. But there's no question every one of the biblical feasts, particularly those three main pilgrimage festivals, the whole purpose of them is and was to give thanks to God. And as I mentioned, all very related to the harvest, the bounty, whatever was the appropriate thing going on at that season. So no, we don't have a Thanksgiving holiday, but going back to biblical times and up to today, these are opportunities for us to thank God for the food we eat, for the clothes we wear, for the most basic things in life. And I think it's also very interesting because there are different elements of the Feast of Tabernacles. And so one of this is hearkening back to this agricultural element, but another is that we go out and we sit in a sukkah, in a somewhat kind of a booth or a hut that we construct for this purpose every year. We are there for the whole holiday. We have all our meals there and very often hang around there and read and entertain guests and whatever in that sukkah. And one of the issues of the sukkah is that the roof cannot be a regular roof. It has to be made from materials that are exposed to the elements. So it can be bamboo slats or some branches, but it's clearly not something that's going to truly protect you from rain or wind or even a blazing sun. It'll give you a bit of shade, but it's not really protecting you. And the idea there is that you, on the one hand, are exposed to the elements, but you're also recognizing the fact that your true protection is from God and not from any solid roofs or, strong houses that you built to protect yourself. And I think that is a very, very important element, because when you are thanking God for your bounty, I don't think it's more than just saying, I recognize that I have done well this year. I shouldn't take credit for myself, but I need to acknowledge that it is really God who has blessed me. But here we go further than that. We are basically saying we are dependent on God, that if it weren't for God, we would have no protection. And there's no better way to express that than to take yourself away from your normal protections and to say, okay, I recognize God. I am totally vulnerable, and I am, understand that you are my only protection. And I think those two things go together, the submission to God's protection on the one hand, and the thankfulness to God for giving us what he has given us. I think those are really complementary ideas. And there's other things I want to get into, but I was wondering, Tommy, maybe, because you've been so involved with harvesting the grapes. I've never been involved in agriculture, as you well know. It's not my thing. I like, I'm the keep it clean. Don't put my hands in the mud or anything like that. But I was wondering, Tommy, when you finish the grape harvest, is there some sort of celebration that goes on among the farmers?
Yes, we have a big celebration. We actually just do it here at our base here on the Mount of Blessing. We invite all the farmers and we all get together, and it's just I was gonna say a shindig, but I don't know if that's a Hebrew saying or not.
I don't think so, but I know what a shindig is.
So
it's a big party for anyone listening that has no idea what a shindig is. It's a Southern way to say party.
Yeah, and it's just it really is a celebration. And I mean that's and I think that's Israel. If you think about it, Israel had a lot to be thankful for when they saw the hanging fruit, the ripe hanging fruit, whether it was apples or grapes or whatever the wheat, or that there wasn't locusts coming in and eating everything, and there was so many things to be afraid of,
Or drought is the big
yeah,
thing here.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think too that we're always taught, we probably talked about it here, that in Egypt you didn't have to worry about it. There was a river that ran through Egypt, and you had water 24/7, right? And in Israel you have to have, and matter of fact, the prayers are about to change, right? I mean, the prayers for rain we're about to switch the prayers in the Jewish prayer, in the Amidah, or whatever the prayer is, that it's it's about to start raining again here in just a couple of months, and every Israeli is praying for it. It's interesting too, just a side note, that all the tourists that come also pray that it doesn't rain, right?
Right.
But there's an interesting thing with that. I don't know if you're aware of this. I love this. First of all, what you were talking about is the difference between Israel and Egypt. This is right out of Deuteronomy 11. So I just want to remind people, Deuteronomy 11 verses 10 and 11, this really encapsulates it, the difference between them, and the fact that Israel has to look to the heavens for its water. And, there is that idea there, not just looking to the clouds, but to look beyond the clouds to the fact that God is bringing the water. And it's not like in Egypt where the water just seems to be always there. But, it's really a funny thing, what you were just mentioning now, Tommy. Now I lost my train of thought.
Read the scripture in Exodus or wherever you were at.
No, I know what you were saying. No. Okay. No. I know. I remember that. So you were saying about the difference between the tourists and the and people, like the ordinary Israelis, and they're sitting there praying for rain, but the tourists don't want rain. So there is this thing, two things that are very interesting. First of all, we say the prayer for rain. We start the initial prayer for rain at the very end, the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles, okay? But actually, it's not the complete prayer for rain. What we start at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles is we just remind God that he's the one that brings the rain, okay? But we don't actually turn to God and ask him to bring the rain until 2 weeks later. That was because we were giving the pilgrims who came to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast, we're giving them 2 weeks to get home.
Before the floods come.
Another thing is, there's another prayer that we say around the same time, and we ask God, do not listen to the travelers who are asking you for it not to rain. And I just love that, because that will cover the tourists, okay? The tourists are going to say, please, God, give us the sunny days so that we can go up to Masada, okay? And I'm going to say to God, don't listen. Because our fruits and our wheat and all that stuff needs the rain. So it's great. I just love the way our sages thought of these things.
Right.
They were so aware of human nature, and that's how this all developed.
Which, I mean, in talking about this, you just have to imagine what the Israelites were like. They've been in the desert for 40 years. They've eaten nothing but manna 3 times a day. You're sick of it. And then you enter the promised land and you see these grape clusters that takes 2 people to carry. Like, can you imagine the Thanksgiving that just rose up out of them, of just, wow, real food.
Yeah.
So.
No, but also that's another thing. You're reminding me of something. This is actually fabulous. I can't believe you're really reminding me of something amazing here that I wasn't thinking about. We read in the book of Joshua that they end up, when they come into the land, and then this is in Joshua 5, just before they conquer Jericho. They've already crossed the Jordan, and they're sitting there and whatever. And it then says, this is chapter 5, verse 12, that the manna stopped the next day. First it was Passover, okay? And then it says the manna stopped the next day, okay? And then for the first time, what did they do? They ate from the wheat or from the harvest of the land, okay?
Right.
Now, every year on the first Shabbat after Passover, there is a custom that you make, challah bread is the twisted loaf of bread, the braided bread that we eat on the Sabbath, on Shabbat. And there's a special custom to either embed a key in the challah, or, and this is usually what people do today, is they make a challah in the shape of a key. Okay. And this is to commemorate this day, this right after Passover, when for the first time they ate of the wheat of the land. And why the key is symbolizing the entry into the land of Israel.
Wow.
It's to symbolize the entry. And so that is something that they celebrate. Now, if you think about that, I never thought of this before. Just now, as we were talking now, it occurred to me that, we have a custom in Judaism to have personal Thanksgiving feasts and national Thanksgiving feasts. I mean, if you think about it, like a holiday like Purim, for example. Purim is a holiday that, from the book of Esther in the Bible, where the Jews are threatened with annihilation and God saves them. And as a result, what we see in the Purim story is they have feasts and they exchange goodies and all kinds of stuff. And as a result of that, we have, in Judaism, we have an annual holiday of Purim, where one of the main things of that holiday is we have a huge meal. We literally have a feast, and in a way that's a Thanksgiving feast, because what we're doing is we're enjoying, food, but we're thanking God for this amazing miracle. And this idea of a Thanksgiving feast is very common in Israel beyond the national holidays, so that individuals who have had a personal miracle, they recovered from a serious disease, or they were in a car accident and survived, or they were in an earthquake and survived, or anything like that, they will make a Thanksgiving feast. Now, today, that's very common. I have a number of friends, unfortunately, who had cancer and spent a long time in treatment, and then thank God they survived and they returned to health. And then they made this kind of a Thanksgiving feast, either just for their family members, sometimes they invite friends. And, it becomes a time not just to eat and enjoy each other's company, but to, really give thanks to God.
It's kind of like a memorial, when God,
no, it's the opposite. It's memorials usually for somebody who died. This is,
okay. I'm thinking like right. That's what I was trying to say is, like it really marks the spot. I'm thinking of like, when they crossed the Jordan and God told them, go get 12 rocks and set them up, and you're going to remember. And that's kind of a memorial. It's like a remembering that God saved them. It's
the thing is, that's two different things, I think. Maybe there's an underlying thanks, but the memorial is kind of static. You put it up and it lasts. This idea of Thanksgiving feast, and what I was saying is, so today you have people doing this and it's a one-off. But we know in our tradition that there are people that created a feast. In other words, an annual feast that was commemorated by them and their families until forever, or until people died and forgot about it. But I think that is also, when I think about the making of this challah and that first Sabbath after Passover, I'm thinking in many ways that's parallel to these Thanksgiving feasts. That you mark it with something food oriented. We're a very food oriented religion. Anyway, so that was just some ramblings and thoughts I had about how
look, I'm thinking, you've just come out of 8 days of not eating bread, and it's the first Shabbat you get to eat bread. So let's make it fun. Let's turn it into the shape of a key. I love it. Well, why don't you tell us, Sondra, a little bit about your traditions, being raised in America, celebrating Thanksgiving. How did that change when you moved to Israel? And what are some of your memories as a child being in America, celebrating Thanksgiving?
Well, Thanksgiving when I was a child was a little different than it is today. I would say it was really not commercial. I think they had football. I wouldn't know because I never was interested in football. I do know that regardless of what was going on the television, we had a command appearance at my grandparents. And we went there for dinner. It was an early dinner. It usually started about 4:00. And my grandmother cooked, and she made a big deal out of it. And it was a stuffed turkey, and it was cranberry jelly, and it was pumpkin pie and apple pie and all that stuff, which I know is very American. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and we looked forward to it every year. But for my family, it was, in a way, my grandfather turned this into quite a religious holiday, in a way, a personal Thanksgiving, because he was born and raised. He was a young adult, actually, in Europe, and he was living in Czechoslovakia when already in 1937 and 38 he saw the rise of the local Nazi party in Czechoslovakia. And of course, he was extremely aware of what was going on in Germany at the time, as Hitler was already in power and was already threatening and imposing severe limitations on the Jews. And looking ahead, he said, time to get out of here. And it was quite a challenge, because getting a visa to America was not easy. He ended up leaving, and they went to, none of his family they thought he was crazy. His mother, his brothers, his sister, they all thought he was crazy. But he took his family and went to London, where they were for a year and a half, all along trying to get a visa to America, because he felt, rightly so, that England was still a little too close. And he ended up, thank God, finding a way to get to America, and ended up, settling there. My mother grew up there. But, for my grandparents, this was an opportunity to thank God for America.
Wow.
For America, who was there and gave him a refuge when the Jews were being murdered in Europe. And, wow. and so that, he refused to let us take it lightly. It could never just be about watching cartoons in the Thanksgiving parade in the morning, although we did that, but to him, he would always stop everyone, and he would make this speech, not a speech, but, he would make sure that he would really stand and acknowledge God and acknowledge America for the freedom and the refuge that America afforded to our family. And that was very special. I also just have to say something about Black Friday. Living in Israel, now I knew Black Friday as a kid. Black Friday was very different than what it is today. My parents had retail stores, and Black Friday then meant it was a day you would never, ever put anything on sale. Never. The idea was that on the Friday after Thanksgiving, when many people had off, they would start their Christmas shopping. It was the day you sold full price. Okay. And until Christmas, everything was full price. Right. And the wisdom went in the retail world that how well you did on that one Black Friday. It was called Black Friday because it's the Friday you're in the black as opposed to in red. Okay. Right. So depending on how well you did on that Friday was going to be an indicator on how well you did for the whole season. And now we, of course, never celebrated Christmas, but my father made money on Christmas because in the gift store, he sold gifts and greeting cards. That's what he sold. So for him, the launch of the pre-Christmas business was then. And so that was really funny. And today, Black Friday has become a day of sales, but not just a day of sales in the United States. Because of the internet, all of the internet sites that, sell things also have Black Friday sales. So this is all over the world. In Israel, no one has ever heard of Thanksgiving. They all know about Black Friday. And they don't
no idea what it is.
They don't know what it is.
A great
Black
sale.
Friday means the day that you go on the internet and you buy things.
Yeah.
And then because of the internet, now in Israel, the local stores all have Black Friday sales. Now they don't know what it is. They know it's a day of sales.
They know they have to compete with the internet.
The way this has all changed.
I think it's a Christian conspiracy to get you guys to do Christmas, every
Don't think so.
Don't think so. Yeah. No, that is I was just thinking about how it just stuck with me that your family came out of the Czechoslovakia because it didn't do well in with the Holocaust, and so many of those people didn't make it. Isn't that where Raoul Wallenberg was
No, he
became
was in Lithuania.
Lithuania? I thought he was.
Yeah.
I thought he was in the
No,
Czechoslovakia too.
no, I don't think so.
Anyway,
but what's interesting about Czechoslovakia, it's a country that was only created after World War One. It was because after World War One, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was divided up, and it was comprised of what had been the principalities of Slovakia and Czech, whatever that was called, and maybe something else, and it became Czechoslovakia. And then during that time, it was one of the best democracies in Europe. And wow. At a time when in the United States, Jews were subject to quotas. Only a certain number of Jews were allowed to be admitted to universities. It was very, very limited, and you had to be absolutely brilliant to get into any university. And it was tremendous discrimination at that time against Jews. In Czechoslovakia, almost half the university students were Jewish. There was absolutely total freedom and opportunity. So for my grandfather, who was born in 1899, okay?
Wow.
So as a young man, he, after World War One, he suddenly enjoyed so many more freedoms than before. So let's say from 1918, 1919, until 1937, 38. Okay. So we're talking about almost 20 years. Czechoslovakia was one of the best places for a Jew to live.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, total,
right. Well, and for him to have that foresight, I mean, to be able to look into what was going on instead of just looking what was happening right here and life is good, bad things won't ever come here. Obviously, God put that into his heart to say, no, yes. You need to look ahead. You need to see what's coming.
Right.
And he listened to that still small voice and went into the wilderness, Right. He left behind what was known and what was easy and went into a hard time. Right. But it saved his life, and here you are.
Exactly.
I think and this is, I think, relevant because I think to be thankful for the nation of Israel is and I think a lot of people don't really, they're confused about why is Israel existing, other than, obviously it's a biblical prophetic event that's happening. But there's a confusion about why does it have to be a Jewish state? America is not, we say it's a Christian country, but yet it's not. It was really formed to bring in everybody, all religions, all, everybody. But Israel's a Jewish state, and that really bothers people to some, especially that don't understand the significance of. But it seems like that God has really put Israel in a place, and it has to be a home. It's the only place in the world where God has put a specific place that the Jewish people can really thrive. And that's what you're doing. You're thriving. And I think that the place of being very thankful for even the existence of a place, or it's not without its battle. It's certainly not without, and even miracles, that have happened to keep its survival. But, in this season of giving thanks, I for one, to see that this has to be, we have to be thankful that God has allowed and established this Jewish state. And it has to be this way. It can't be, even though you say that, there's still this, this multi-ethnic place where Jews live, because Jews make up, a lot of different groups of people. A Jew is not just doesn't all look like Sondra Baras, they don't all look like, Liza Minnelli or, whoever.
Barbara Streisand.
Liza Minnelli wasn't Jewish.
What's that?
Liza Minnelli wasn't Jewish.
I thought she was Jewish.
No.
Sure, I think. We'll have to look it up. I think she was.
Oh, could be.
Anyway, okay, so
But Barbara Streisand was Jewish.
Barbara Streisand was definitely. Barbara Streisand was leave in the comments below if you think Liza Minnelli was Jewish. But they don't all look. They don't all look like that. There's such a, there's people from Jews from all over the world, from all the different places coming here, and I think it's just it's amazing to live in this time where we can, and we should be during this time, during this season, thankful that God has chosen this generation to establish the state of Israel, and all of us should be thankful for that.
Amen.
Okay, I just looked it up. Liza Minnelli's not Jewish.
Come on.
Her mother was Judy Garland. I've been saying
that for years that she was Jewish.
Yeah. Judy Garland was her mother. She was not Jewish.
I'm so humiliated.
And Minnelli was Italian.
Italian Jews, they're Jewish Italians.
But they wouldn't have the name Minnelli. It's okay.
Probably 50 years I've been talking about Liza Minnelli as being Jewish.
Okay.
Now I'm correct in public, right in front of everybody.
What can I tell you?
Anyway. Well, moving on.
Barbara Streisand. Barbara Streisand
is Jewish.
I'll tell you something. Barbara Streisand has an amazing rendition of a prayer that we say on Rosh Hashanah, on the Jewish New Year, called Avinu Malkeinu. So she's not only Jewish, but she sings Jewish prayers.
Wow.
But that's aside.
That's a good example for everybody.
Speaking of prayer, Sondra, great segue. Can you talk to us about, I know about this, but I'm not sure how many of our Christian friends know that every morning before you get out of bed, there is a prayer that you say. And tell us a little bit about that, because I think it ties into this. And when I first learned of this, it really made me stop and go, there's something to this, and we do need to be thankful. So tell us about that prayer every morning.
Okay, so first of all, there's a bit of a background to it. There's a Jewish tradition that when you go to sleep, you're in a quasi-death-like situation, okay? And that your soul is departed from you for a bit, or whatever. I don't think these things can be taken literally. We all know when somebody sleeps, they're not dead, okay? But there is that concept, and so there is a prayer that goes back, of course, thousands of years. That it is exactly what you said, Kim. That you say it as soon as you get up, and it goes like this. It's just a very short sentence. It's I'm thanking you. Okay, I thank you, the King, the living and eternal King, that if you have returned my soul to me with mercy, wondrous is your faithfulness. Okay, wow. That's the prayer. And I think on its most basic level, what you're basically saying is, thank God that I was able to wake up for a new day.
Amen.
It's the simplest thing, Yep. So I explained what is the background and the way it is worded, but that's really all it is. Thank God I woke up to a new day. And, you say this, children are taught to say this as soon as they can say kinds of words, 3, 4 years old, whatever. And they sing it in school, to learn it, etc. And I'm sure at that time of their lives, they say it kind of rote, Yeah. But, as you get older, of course, especially as you get a lot older and you're at an age when literally people go to sleep and they don't wake up.
Right. Right.
And I think that we can appreciate that not only when we're at that time of our lives, but at all times of our lives, to recognize that it is a miracle that we are able to live another day.
Yeah. Well, and every day is a gift. I think it starts the day. I mean, I think this was what it really spoke to me when I learned of this, is that you value every single moment, every single day as a gift. And you just don't, it helps you to not take it for granted. I think that's the whole point of Thanksgiving, is to not take for granted the blessings that we have each and every day, because it does become so commonplace, or we can just get comfortable, or we can be just, dissatisfied with life, be jealous of, somebody that has something better than us. But when we stop and we're thankful for what we do have, and we really start counting our blessings, then all of a sudden we can look around us and be happy for those around us. I mean, it just puts us in a completely different mindset, and really deals with a lot of our human fallacies and our human tendencies, and just puts our focus back on God where it needs to be. So it's my 2 cents.
I tell you, one of the things I think about though with Thanksgiving, and I think it's also very important, and it goes back to my grandfather when he was thanking God, but he was also thanking America. And I think Thanksgiving should not just be about thanking God. I think it also needs to be about thanking the people around us who have done things for us. And I think when you show appreciation, it's not just between you and God. In fact, I believe that God expects us to show appreciation to those around us.
For sure.
It's just part of human kindness. It's part of the kind of relationships that God wants us to be building with our fellow human beings. And so I think it's also a time to look around you and say, oh, this neighbor or this friend or this family member did me a particularly good turn, helped me at a time when I really needed help. And this is a time to say thank you for that as well.
And that reminds me too of something that we've done in the past, and that we do what we call the edification game. And we will go, like, get in circle and just start talking about this. We'll pick, we'll go one person around the circle and just talk about what they mean, what significant thing that they've done, why they're important, why they're valuable, why that just to a time, because I think we live in this world where there's so much. We see the negative, we see the negativity, and it's certainly a time when we do need to put these times aside. We're not good at just happening naturally. We're not naturally edifiers. We're not natural people that, at least, my family. I mean, I didn't grow up in a place where everybody was saying nice things, and it was kind of stupid, like, who are you? This is weird, But when you purposely sit around and say, I really appreciate you because, I think that what you're saying is such an important thing. And we actually started doing that. Actually, somebody brought that idea to us, and we do it here with our volunteers as well. At the end of our volunteer time, we'll get around in our team circles and just edify each other before they leave. So they, because a lot of people, some people would say, I've never heard any good things said to me, about it, directly. So encouraging people to say something in this season of Thanksgiving is, to each other, not just thanking God. Sometimes it's easier to thank God than it is to thank the people that are around you, harder to do that. We have to really force ourselves to do it. And the other thing too, I think is interesting, because when I read the Psalms, there's the Psalm for Shabbat, Psalms 92. The first deal is to give thanks to the Lord. Right. So it seems like it almost in Jewish custom, it's, there's Thanksgiving every week, that that's at least here in my Bible, it just says it's the song for Shabbat. It is good to give thanks to the Lord. And then it goes on, and to sing praises to your name most high, to declare your loving kindness in the morning, and then your faithfulness every night. And what a great Psalms. The Psalms are there are these Psalms that are very have a lot of thankfulness, and they're just edifying in that way. And we my son actually wrote us some music to this song. So every Shabbat we actually sing this song, and I'm not going to sing it here today. You have to, but it is it's a long psalm, but we always sing it, and it reminds us to give thanks, every week, to give thanks. I appreciate that. That's what the Jewish culture has, really challenged me living in this country for a big part of the year. That I'm challenged with that we do things like, it's really a lot of talk about Lashon Hara or speaking evil again. You're really looking at this part of humanity that's not sometimes very good, and really challenging us to not walk in that place, but to be grateful or thankful or edifying other people. So it's good.
That's great. No, it's nice that you mentioned that psalm. It is a psalm that we say on Shabbat as part of our prayers a number of different times during the day. And there are different songs to different parts of it. So yeah, it is a psalm that we do pray and sing, many different ways in different contexts. But yeah, I think that's great. I like the way you remind us that in this song for Sabbath, the first thing we're doing is thanking God. And that's good. And I have to say, growing up, I remember this as a child. There's Sabbath for us is a day of rest, a day of departure from what you do all the time. But there's also a day of things you don't do. And I remember as a child, of course, primary in our minds was that we didn't watch television, we couldn't call our friends on the phone, all these things. And so you would think it as a child, sometimes you would think, there were such restrictions on the day, not that we suffered in any way, but that was sometimes your association. It's all these days a day you can't do all these things. And all the grown-ups around us will be saying, thank God for the Sabbath. Thank God for the Sabbath. And I remember thinking, I don't get it. Why? Okay, it's fine, but why thank God? And then, of course, as you get older, you recognize when your daily lives are so stressed and pressured and so full of things, chasing your tail, trying to make a living, worrying about all the things you have to worry about. And then when it comes to Sabbath, all of that is erased. And you just step out of all of that reality, and you have a day that is purely about family, spirituality, Bible. That's it. And I grew to understand how deeply appreciative we are naturally, for the Sabbath day. So it kind of makes sense here that the first thing when he talks about the Sabbath is the thank you, and I think that's very, very much something that is coming from a Sabbath day, that you come to recognize, where a commandment like the Sabbath it's not something intuitive. It's not something that comes from let's say, a universal sense of morality. It's something that it was really a gift. God gave us a gift. And I think that is something that then, you appreciate and you start to realize. And I think it's maybe in many ways kind of represents so much of what we have to thank God for. We don't just thank God when I won the lottery, or one of the things that I don't know, I have debates with this with my friends. It bothers me when I see sports heroes, baseball players, basketball players, whatever, and they're saying, and it doesn't matter if they're Jewish or Christian, I see both of them doing this. Please, God, give me the goal. All right. Please, God, let me hit the thing. We see
when they win, it's always, God.
No, it doesn't matter. And I'm thinking, is this really what you need God to help you for? Really? Why is a goal important? That's always my thing. I mean, if I'm going to ask God for something, it's not going to be about a goal. It's going to be something a lot more important. But that's, but I think though that this idea of appreciating the fact that look at the gifts that God gives us. And I don't mean about the goals. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the things that are not necessarily things that you didn't have and you were, please God, give me this. And then you gave it, you got it the next day or whatever. But much more basic things, like when we talked about thanking God in the morning that you're alive, okay?
Man.
Thanking God for the Sabbath, thanking God for the fact that he gave us the Bible. Think all these things, these are the things that people never think to think about because it's what they take for granted.
I know, Sondra, I was going to say, though, that you might change your mind, though, if one of those, pro athletes starts supporting CFOIC, and you might be praying for that goal, God, give it to them, I'm just saying.
No, I would pray. I'll tell you what I would pray for. I would pray for if someone had a lottery ticket and he told me if he wins the lottery, he's going to give CFOIC half the money, then I would say, pray, God, give him that lottery ticket. But whatever.
Well, I think, I'd love to hear from our viewers that are watching this. If there's a way that you celebrate Thanksgiving or, any thoughts that you have on this, things that you're thankful for, put them in the comments below. Just make this a conversation and let us know, how do you celebrate Thanksgiving? What are some of your memories? What are some of your thoughts on, giving thanks and how it affects you and how it affects your attitudes?
Yeah, it's so important.
Very much so.
Great to see you all.
Very much so. Until next time.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed that film. And we have lots more film content and emails and articles that I'm sure you will enjoy as well. Check out our website at cfoic.com and subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that right from the homepage. I know you will really enjoy the content that will land in your inbox on a regular basis. Hope to see you soon.